Hey everybody, welcome back to another tech video, and this video was originally slated to be sort of a summary video of the things that I haven't already talked about from Apple's event that I wasn't as interested in. Things like the new colors for the iPhone, which green is cool. I think that the green that they used on the 11 was the best color ever, but I do like the blue on the 13, so I'm going to be sticking with that. Also, I'm not a rich YouTuber, I'm poor, so I'm definitely sticking with that. The new iPhone SE 3, which is cool that they finally put a super modern chip in it. These things are going to be awesome for your dad or your grandpa who is going to get a basic iPhone that's going to last for really long because they never upgrade. I think it's cool. Not really up my alley though. The studio display really did interest me, but I'm not willing to spend $1,500 on a screen when I already have two really nice ones, and I already have Apple's last studio display. Not this one. These. Yeah. Oh yeah, and they're cool as hell. But I was going to cover all those and the iPad Air with the M1 chip, but that one in particular caught my attention because I don't really get what Apple's trying to do with their product lineup by introducing this. And it actually raised a lot of questions and had me thinking a lot about who is it for? Now, I didn't buy one, and I already watched a few videos from people who did buy one, who have the money to do that, and I figured I'd make a video giving my thoughts because I have a bit of experience with the M1 chip. Fun fact, this entire channel, from my server that stores all my videos to the laptop, we'll get to that later, but the laptop that I've edited videos on the go, to my whole desktop that I edit things here in the office with, all run on M1. Every single one of them. I have been exclusively Apple Silicon since the M1 Mac came out. So I have a bit of experience with the performance. The design, however, is something I don't have as much experience with, but in general, for this video, I wanted to go over who I think it's for, who I think it isn't for, and how I think it'll be in terms of performance based on my previous experiences with other devices. So let's get right into it. So first things first, in terms of design, this device is the exact same as the iPad Air from the last generation that I sold a lot of when I worked at Best Buy, and is very similar, in fact, almost identical in terms of dimensions to the 11-inch iPad Pro, which I actually daily drove as a first-generation iPad Pro for probably 2 years before I stepped on the screen, spent more money than I should have to replace the screen, and then traded it in to get a bigger iPad. When it comes to the actual portability of the device, it is a great balance between the really nice big iPad Pro, which I love, and the smaller, not as great base model iPad, kind of right in the middle. In this case, you're not quite getting the 11-inch model, but you're getting a 10.9-inch display. Okay, cool. In fact, overall, the biggest changes that you get with this device, just to sort of sum those up in a nice little bow, are the new M1 chip, supposedly faster USB-C. I'm hoping so, because the USB-C standard from before was okay, but Thunderbolt 4 on the new iPads is kind of impressive, and I'm kind of bummed that they didn't put that in the iPad Air. And you also get front row, the whole moving camera thing for FaceTime calls or Teams, if Teams allows it, or YouTube live streams when they used to allow it before YouTube said fuck you to the Apple users and took it away. I'm still very salty about that because I spent so much time setting up a stream and then realized that it didn't work anymore. Fuck you, YouTube. So to sum up the design, I think this model, whether it be the 11-inch Pro or the iPad Air, is a good bump up from the base model. You're going from the smaller 10.2-inch screen to a genuinely usable 10.9 or 11-inch model, and portability for the performance was honestly already really good, and it has just gotten better with the M1. We'll talk about performance later, like I keep saying. The few things they did remove from the iPad Air, whether it be for cost or size, are the same things they removed from the last generation, which is Face ID, which I personally have fallen in love with Face ID. I will not use anything else unless I absolutely have to. It is so good, even though the orientation on the iPad for the camera and the sensors is the wrong way in my opinion, but still more usable, and I love it. But putting the fingerprint reader in the power button is still a really cool feature, and considering I barely lock my device, I wouldn't really use it as much, but for people who do, it's there. And they also reduced the number of speakers from 4 to 2, which doesn't really seem like a bad thing if you're just listening to it in a vacuum, and for most people, you're just going to be listening to it in your living room, because if you listen to it in a vacuum, there's not going to be any sound, and you will also probably not be alive. But if you're listening to it on its own, the speakers are fine. In fact, they are really good for a 2-speaker system in a tablet that thin. However, when I used to work at Best Buy, I would compare the 11-inch iPad Pro to the iPad Air of that generation, and there was a very noticeable difference, not just in volume, even though volume is pretty much what most people make their buying decisions on with speakers, but also in the clarity of the really high end and a lot of bass. There was a huge difference in bass, and if you stepped up to the 12.9 inch, it's even more noticeable, though that's not really what we're talking about here. So yeah, a cutback on the speakers and a cutback on Face ID in favor of Touch ID, and you're also getting technically a lower resolution display, but for most people it's not really noticeable. And honestly, I rocked an 11-inch MacBook Air for a little while, and considering that these are all Retina displays and the 11-inch MacBook Pro was, well, definitely not, this is still better. In fact, apart from the resolution and physical size, it's almost the same as the 11-inch iPad Pro. Very similar brightness, same contrast ratio. A lot of things are essentially the same. So if you're intending to use an iPad Pro for its display, you're probably going to get the exact same or pretty damn close on the iPad Air, and you're going to be saving quite a bit of money for it. So moving away from the design, the biggest difference, of course, is the colors. Have you seen these? I am so happy that they moved away from pastel. No, but in all seriousness, the biggest change is going to be in the processor, the M1 chip, which I can speak on in very, very elaborate detail. But I won't, because that's probably going to bore most of you. When it comes to the M1, I have been extremely impressed with the performance that I've gotten from both of my desktops. The reliability and instant wake from my server has been amazing. I have actually only shut that thing down for updates, and it'll run for months at a time if I don't run updates, and it just sits there ticking, running all my storage, backing up my channel. It's great. So in terms of reliability, this chip has been phenomenal. Raw performance, especially for the wattage and especially for the price, is pretty insane. When I upgraded to it, it was already outperforming my 16-inch i9 MacBook Pro, and I have only really in the last probably 4 months sort of hit the ceiling. And the only reason I've hit the ceiling when it comes to performance, specifically on my desktop version, is because I have been pushing projects harder and harder and harder because I had that headroom. So I am very impressed with the M1's performance. But that's all in desktop land. That's not really going to be something applicable to the tablet, right? Kind of. So y'all remember this video?
What's a computer?
The one that ruffled a lot of feathers by asking, what's a computer? Well, remember when I said that my laptop has been what I've been editing things on the go with? Yeah, so you all probably thought that I was talking about the MacBook Air or the MacBook Pro run off the M1, but in reality, that laptop, I keep using air quotes for a reason, has been my 12.9-inch iPad Pro with the M1 chip. Now, the reason why I'm calling it a laptop with air quotes is not to piss off the PC master race, who is probably screaming in the comments right now about how the iPad isn't a laptop, but I'm actually doing that because the workflow I've been throwing at my iPad Pro is pretty damn close to equal to the workflow that I've been throwing at my Mac Mini for about a year now. Like, I'm not kidding. This video right now is being edited on my iPad Pro through LumaFusion, which is an extremely capable, may I dare say, pro application. All right, enough. Bring it in. Yeah, that is how impressive the performance out of these tablets can be. But that's where my question comes in. Who is this iPad for? Because the performance you get out of the 11-inch and 12.9-inch iPad Pro is nothing short of amazing, considering that it is a laptop/desktop chip crammed into a stupid thin, very battery efficient, beautiful display wielding tablet. And then they put it in the iPad Air. It's weird, right? When it comes to putting the M1 chip in the iPad Air, there are a few things where I think it will excel. One of them is on-the-go gaming, which is a weird thing to sort of hone in on, but hear me out. When it comes to the M1, especially when it comes to its price, its power draw, and its sort of weight class in the CPU world, it has some pretty impressive graphics. I have legitimately played several hours of Kerbal Space Program on my Mac Mini, and when it comes to the games that you can play on the iPad, a lot of those games are running at 60 FPS and are generally locked at that. A good example of this is Genshin Impact, which I don't play as much of as I should. I should really get more into that, but I've tried to run it at 120 hertz and it's just not there. So as much as I love the ProMotion display, if gaming is going to be one of the things you do frequently on this tablet, it's probably not going to really be necessary to bump up to the Pro for that display. It's going to be locked at 60 hertz, but it's going to be locked at 60 hertz. And of course, because the iPad Air only comes with a 60 hertz panel, that's really not going to be an issue. If you're doing photo editing and you're not using the Apple Pencil, first things first, I don't know what's wrong with you. The Apple Pencil is one of the best tools to have ever come out. But if you are a keyboard and trackpad editor and you are just using your finger or those tools, I think this would also be fine because, again, the display, at least in terms of the resolution, the picture quality, and the brightness, are going to be basically the same on the 11-inch or the iPad Air. So that's another case where you could use it. And the last person I can think of who would buy this is a student. And I say this because students coming from elementary school or even middle school often have things like Chromebooks, or in a better case, have something like a base model iPad. And if they know what they're looking for, they may actually look at an iPad Air. When the M1 chip first came out in the MacBook Air and the MacBook Pro, it was already just dominating laptops in that same price category of $999 and up. But now that it's available in something as relatively low priced as an iPad, and in this case with schooling, an iPad would be expected to last upwards of 4 to potentially 8 years, having something like this at that price able to perform above a lot of devices in that same price category is nothing short of a steal. Even with accessories that aren't the direct from Apple ones, you can make a fairly competent laptop out of this device. So you could actually have a genuine Surface competitor as long as the developers that make the apps that you use don't have their head up their ass. Adobe. But as long as the developers are competent and actually make updates to take advantage of the M1 chip or have already done so, you can have yourself a really solid device with standard ports or standard port and the ability to attach adapters that give you regular ports like a laptop and still staying under a price category that would normally have laptops that are still slower than this M1 chip. Hey, Editor Garrett hopping in here real quick because I forgot to mention storage in the performance category, so I'm going to just throw that in right here and say that the base model of the Air comes with 64 gigs of storage and the upgraded Max version is 256 gigs, which is going to get you in a price that is remarkably close to the price of the iPad Pro, but that only starts out at 128 gigs. In my opinion, 128 gigs or 256 is going to be better for most use cases, though a few of the use cases I mentioned, especially with some liberal use of external storage, may be able to get by with 64 gigabytes, but not for nearly as long as what I was saying, which would be like for a student 4 years or more. So just wanted to drop that in here real quick. Anyway, back to the video. So yeah, people who have a decent amount of disposable income and are going to be doing a lot of on-the-go gaming with this tablet, people who do art without the Apple Pencil, or honestly who don't mind the latency of a 60 hertz panel for drawing, and students who have good taste and know what they're looking for. Those are the people who I would genuinely think would benefit from having one of these devices. That, or somebody who's looking for a genuine upgrade from the base model iPad, because while that is great as an entry model to get you into the Apple ecosystem and to get you into what an iPad is actually all about, once you kind of outgrow that, getting into this is going to be like hopping out of a base model Honda Civic from the 80s and getting into something more akin to, it's not too fancy, but it's also not like really low end, so I don't know, we'll call it like an SN95 Mustang, but like the really cool one, the SVT model that didn't come with air conditioning because they just wanted to make it so fast. Not having the air conditioning is sort of my analogy for getting rid of Face ID and the 2 speakers. Now for the people who shouldn't buy this, literally anybody who has an M1 powered iPad Pro, whether it be the 11-inch or especially the 12.9-inch, don't bother. Like, to be brutally honest, I probably would not have upgraded to the M1 iPad Pro if I hadn't broken my 11-inch model first gen, and I also didn't just genuinely feel like I would need a bigger display. But both of those things happened, and here we are. And I have a 12.9-inch that I've been running this entire channel off of on the go, and you probably didn't even notice until I pointed it out in this video. Now everybody knows. Also, people who have a Mac Mini, because if you bought a Mac Mini, you kind of know what you're looking for, and you bought yourself a phenomenal tablet for its size and one of the coolest little guys. I still want one. I don't need one for anything in particular, but I have a few tasks I could definitely use it for. Please shut up. But yeah, iPad mini people, I don't even know why you're watching this video, because you have yourself the best small tablet on the market, period. And it's basically just this same iPad Air, but shrunk, and obviously not rocking the M1 chip because you don't want a Note 7 situation with something catching fire in your pocket. So iPad mini people, iPad Pro M1 or honestly even iPad Pro A12Z people, don't buy this. You don't need it. Your device is better in most ways, and in the case of the iPad mini folks, you knew what you were looking for. But for students who are either looking to upgrade from the base model iPad or just genuinely want something solid for the price, for artists who really don't care about the latency and are potentially working with things that don't really require as fast of a responding display and just care about layers, or, of course, the most important, the gamers among us who really have an addiction to Genshin Impact on the highest settings, this is for you. But that's it. Those are the people who I think should and shouldn't buy this. Obviously, I didn't buy one because I don't have the money to, and I don't need one because I have an M1 iPad Pro already. But for those of you who watch this video who maybe found something useful out of it, make sure to subscribe. I'm trying to make more content like this because it seems to be something that you guys are genuinely interested in, things that are more topical. And of course, make sure to leave a comment letting me know what you all think about my thoughts, whether I'm wrong, whether I'm right, whether you bought one, whether you didn't. I'm interested. And aside from that, a like would be appreciated, and I'll see you all in the next video. Make sure to be there, and have a good one.